You know, when we talk about health today, one thing that stands out is this huge epidemic of chronic illnesses. Everywhere you look, whether it's in the United States, the UK, Canada, or even in many parts of the developing world, you'll find people struggling with the same set of problems: diabetes, heart disease, obesity, arthritis, depression, autoimmune diseases, even things like Alzheimer's that we used to think of as just old age. And the striking part is that most of these conditions are not infectious diseases. They're not something you just catch. They are lifestyle driven. They are created over years. And the sad truth is that the way we currently treat them is often completely upside down. Think about it. The way our healthcare system is designed, the focus is usually on symptom management. If your blood sugar is high, the doctor prescribes a pill or insulin. If your cholesterol is high, you get a statin. If you have high blood pressure, here's a medication for that. If you're in pain, take a painkiller. The whole model is essentially about matching the pill to the ill. But the real question is, why did the blood sugar rise in the first place? Why is the cholesterol going up? Why is the body inflamed? That's what we almost never stop to ask. And if you don't ask the right questions, you will never arrive at the right answers. I want you to pause and reflect on this. What if all these seemingly different diseases actually share a common root? What if they are not separate, isolated problems, but different branches of the same tree? If that's true, and science is showing us it is, then it means we've been approaching this whole issue from the wrong angle. We're cutting off the branches, but the root of the tree is still alive, and it keeps sprouting new branches. And until we actually treat the root, the problem is never going to go away. Now, this is where functional medicine comes in, and why I am so passionate about it, because functional medicine asks, what is the root cause? What are the underlying imbalances in the body that are driving disease? Instead of just focusing on a label, diabetes, arthritis, depression, it looks at the whole system. It asks what's happening with your diet, your gut health, your hormones, your sleep, your stress, your exposure to toxins, because these are the things that either create health or create disease. Let me give you a simple analogy. Imagine your car's check engine light turns on. Would you just put a sticker over the light so you don't see it anymore? Of course not. You would take it to a mechanic to find out what's wrong inside. Is the oil low? Is the fuel system clogged? Something is off, and the light is just a signal. Now, in modern medicine, what we often do is just cover the light. We don't ask what's really happening in the engine. And chronic diseases are exactly that. The body's check engine light: high blood sugar, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, pain, fatigue, depression. These are signals. They're not the problem itself. They're telling you something deeper is wrong. And here's the empowering part. When you actually dig into the root causes, you find that these problems are not random. They're not inevitable. They're driven by the way we live, the way we eat, the way we move or don't move, the way we sleep, the way we manage stress, the way our environment affects us. And the incredible news is, once you address those things, the body has this amazing capacity to heal itself. That's what most people don't realize. The body is designed for health, not for disease. If you give it what it needs and remove what harms it, it naturally finds its way back to balance. So when we talk about treating chronic illnesses, we need to move away from this old model of symptoms, suppression, and move into a model of root cause resolution. It's not about giving you more and more medications for every new symptom. It's about asking, why did the symptoms appear in the first place? What is the body trying to tell us? This shift in perspective changes everything, because once you realize that food, for example, is not just calories, it's information. It literally talks to your genes. You start to see why one person who lives on processed junk food ends up sick, and another person who nourishes themselves with whole, real foods thrives. Food can be medicine or it can be poison, and this is just one piece of the puzzle. Sleep, stress, movement, connection, all these things are part of the medicine we often ignore. If we keep treating diseases at the surface, we're just going to keep people dependent on a system that never really makes them better. But if we go deeper, if we fix the actual leaks in the system, nutritional deficiencies, toxic overload, poor gut health, chronic stress, we see real lasting transformation. Patients who were told they'd have to be on medication for life start to reverse their diabetes. People with autoimmune conditions who couldn't get out of bed start to regain their energy. People with depression who thought it was purely a chemical imbalance in the brain discover that when their gut heals and their inflammation comes down, their mood shifts dramatically. This is not magic. This is science. It's biology. The body is a system, and systems work according to certain principles. If you restore balance, health follows. If you ignore balance and just patch up the symptoms, the disease continues to grow beneath the surface. And that's why we're in the middle of this epidemic, because as a society, we've been patching up instead of truly healing. Let me ask you a very simple question. If a pipe in your house starts leaking, and instead of fixing the pipe, you just keep mopping the floor, how long do you think you'll be able to keep things under control? Maybe a few hours, maybe a few days, but eventually the water will spike. Read, the damage will get worse and your house will be flooded. That is exactly how we treat chronic disease today. We keep mopping. We mop with painkillers, with sleeping pills, with antidepressants, with cholesterol-lowering drugs, with insulin shots, but we rarely stop and repair the actual leak. And as long as the leak is there, the problem keeps coming back. Now, what is that leak? That leak is our lifestyle. That leak is our diet. That leak is the way we're living in a way that is completely mismatched with how our bodies were designed to function. See, our genes haven't changed much in thousands of years, but our food system, our environment, our pace of life, everything else has changed dramatically. We're eating foods that our bodies don't recognize, highly processed, full of sugar, artificial ingredients, industrial oils. And instead of being nourishment, this food actually confuses and harms our biology. Think about it this way. Every single bite of food you put in your mouth is like a message to your body. It's not just fuel, it's information. It literally talks to your genes. It tells your body what to do. It can switch on genes for health, or it can switch on genes for disease. So if you wake up in the morning and you have a sugary cereal, a muffin, a glass of orange juice, which sounds like a normal breakfast for a lot of people, you've basically just told your body, let's start the day with inflammation, with insulin spikes, with fat storage. And then you wonder why you're hungry again an hour later, why your energy crashes by 11 a.m. Why over years your waistline expands, your blood sugar climbs, and you develop type 2 diabetes. Now contrast that with starting your day with real food, say some eggs with vegetables, maybe some avocado, maybe a handful of nuts, or even a smoothie with protein and greens. That's a completely different message to your body. It's saying, let's stabilize blood sugar, let's fuel the brain, let's reduce inflammation, let's provide nutrients that the cells can use to repair and thrive. Same calories, maybe, but totally different information, totally different outcome. And this doesn't just apply to food. The way you live, how much you move, how well you sleep, how you handle stress, these are all forms of information. They're either telling your body to thrive or to break down. Lack of sleep, for example, is not just about being tired. When you don't sleep enough, your body produces more stress hormones, your appetite hormones get out of balance, your blood sugar regulation goes haywire. That's why people who chronically sleep less gain weight, have higher risk of diabetes, higher risk of heart disease. It's not random, it's biology responding to the information it's receiving. And the really fascinating part is that these daily choices, what you eat, how you move, whether you meditate or breathe deeply or manage stress, these things are far more powerful than most medications, because medications typically just block one pathway or suppress one symptom. But lifestyle medicine, root cause medicine, it works upstream. It changes the whole terrain. And when the terrain is healthy, the symptoms naturally disappear. So instead of asking, what drug do I take for diabetes? We should be asking, what is driving my blood sugar up? How can I remove the foods that are causing spikes? How can I improve my muscle sensitivity to insulin through exercise? How can I improve my sleep so my body has a chance to reset? How can I manage stress so I'm not constantly bathing my system in cortisol, which also raises blood sugar? These are the real questions, and when you start answering them, you see healing that no drug could ever provide. And look, I'm not saying medications don't have a place. They do. Sometimes you need them as a bridge, as a temporary support. But they should never be the end of the story. Because if you rely only on drugs, you're just mopping the floor. The leak is saying ill there. The root cause is still driving disease underneath, and eventually you'll find yourself on a whole list of medications, each one managing a side effect of the other without ever truly getting better. I've seen this play out with so many patients. Someone comes in with type 2 diabetes, they're on metformin, maybe even insulin, they've been told this is just how life is going to be. But when we take away the processed foods, when we add in nutrient-dense whole foods, when we help them build muscle through movement, when we address stress and sleep, something amazing happens. Their blood sugar starts to normalize, their need for medication goes down, and many of them actually reverse their diabetes completely. Imagine that. A disease that we've been told is chronic, progressive, irreversible, suddenly going into remission. This is why I say lifestyle is the most powerful medicine we have. And yet, in the conventional system, it's the medicine that's most often ignored. Because it doesn't come in a pill bottle, it doesn't have a brand name, it doesn't generate billions in profits, but it does generate health, it does give people their lives back. And that is something no drug can ever replace. So the question is, do we want to keep mopping forever, or do we want to repair the leak? Because the choice is ours. And once we understand that, the path to healing becomes a lot clearer. Every chronic disease, whether it's diabetes, heart disease, autoimmune conditions, or even depression, has some common underlying factors that connect them all. And once you start to see this, it changes the way you think about health forever. Instead of looking at them as separate diseases with separate treatments, you realize they are really different expressions of the same core problems in the body. Things like chronic inflammation, insulin resistance, nutrient deficiencies, balances in the gut microbiome, exposure to toxins, unmanaged stress, and poor sleep. These are the drivers. These are the hidden forces that create symptoms, and eventually those symptoms get labeled as disease. Now, when you go to a doctor, what usually happens? You get a diagnosis. You're told you have type 2 diabetes, or you have rheumatoid arthritis, or you have major depression, and it feels like that diagnosis is an answer, but in reality, it's just a description. It's just a name we've given to a cluster of symptoms, but naming it doesn't explain why it happened. It doesn't tell you what went wrong inside your body to create those symptoms. And if you don't know the why, how are you going to fix it? Take type 2 diabetes as an example. We think of it as a blood sugar disease, but at its core, it's really a disease of insulin resistance. Your body is flooded with sugar and refined carbohydrates over years and years, and eventually your cells stop responding to insulin properly. So your pancreas has to pump out more and more insulin just to keep up, until eventually it can't keep up anymore and your blood sugar rises. That's the moment when the doctor says you have diabetes. But the process started decades earlier. And the real root cause wasn't a lack of metformin or insulin. It was the constant overload of processed food, sugary drinks, lack of exercise, chronic stress, and poor sleep that set the stage. Now, here's where it gets interesting. If you only treat the symptom, high blood sugar, by giving insulin, you're not actually solving the problem. In fact, in many cases, you're making it worse, because insulin itself drives fat storage, increases inflammation, and creates more resistance in the body. So you end up on a treadmill where the disease progresses and the medications keep piling up. But if you go after the root cause, if you remove the processed foods, bring in whole, nutrient-rich foods, help the body become sensitive to insulin again through movement, repair, sleep, lower stress, you see a totally different outcome. I've seen patients literally get off insulin within weeks of making these changes. That's the power of root cause medicine. And it's not just diabetes, autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, lupus. These conditions are fueled by inflammation, by a confused immune system that's attacking the body. But why is the immune system confused? In many cases, it's the gut. The gut is where 70% of the immune system lives. And when the gut is leaky, when the microbiome is imbalanced, when the diet is full of inflammatory foods, the immune system goes haywire. If all you do is give an immunosuppressant drug, you may calm the symptoms, but you're not actually asking why the immune system is attacking in the first place. Fix the gut, reduce the inflammation, give the body the nutrients it's missing, and often the immune system calms down naturally. Even something like depression, which we often think of as purely a brain disorder, is deeply connected to the rest of the body. We know now that inflammation can drive depression, that gut health plays a huge role in mood through the gut-brain axis, that nutrient deficiencies like low vitamin D, B12, folate, or omega-3s can directly affect brain chemistry. So yes, antidepressants might help some people, but for many, the deeper solution is to address these underlying imbalances. When the gut heals, when inflammation drops, when the brain gets the raw materials it needs, the mood starts to shift in profound ways. This is why I always say the body is a system. You can't separate the parts. You can't just look at blood sugar in isolation or joint pain in isolation or mood in isolation. It's all connected. And the roots of disease often look very similar, even though the branches, the symptoms look different. One person's root cause might show up as diabetes, another's as heart disease, another's as depression. But underneath, it's often the same few core imbalances driving them all. So instead of asking, what drug do I need for this diagnosis, we need to ask, what is driving this imbalance in my body? What is my body trying to tell me? Because symptoms are not the enemy. They're the language of the body. They're signals. And if you listen closely, they'll guide you straight to the root cause. Ignore them or just suppress them, and the body will keep shouting louder and louder until you pay attention. I've seen patients who came to me with a shopping bag full of medications. They had diabetes, high blood pressure, arthritis, reflux, depression, migraines, you name it. In the conventional system, that looks like 5 or 6 separate diseases, each with its own specialist and its own medication. But when we looked deeper, it all came back to the same root issues: a poor diet, an unhealthy gut, chronic inflammation, lack of nutrients, poor sleep. When we worked on those root causes, guess what happened? One by one, the symptoms started to improve, the reflux disappeared, the joint pain calmed down, the blood pressure normalized, the mood lifted, and the medication list got shorter and shorter. That's the power of treating root causes instead of chasing symptoms. And that's the shift we need in medicine. We don't need to keep adding more drugs for every new symptom. We need to go upstream to the source and create real healing. Because once you do that, the body knows what to do. It's designed to heal. It just needs the right conditions. One of the most powerful things I've learned in my years of practicing medicine is that the body never makes mistakes. Symptoms may feel inconvenient, painful, or even scary, but they are not random. They are signals, feedback loops, the body's way of telling us that something is out of balance. And when you start listening to those signals instead of silencing them, everything changes. Take fatigue, for example. So many people complain of being tired all the time. They think it's just part of modern life, or they blame age, or they push through with coffee and sugar. But fatigue is not just a nuisance. It's a clue. It might be telling you that your mitochondria, the little power plants in your cells, aren't getting the nutrients they need, or that you're overloaded with toxins, or that your thyroid isn't functioning properly, or that your blood sugar is spiking and crashing all day long. So instead of just reaching for another caffeine fix, the smarter question is, why am I so tired? What's the body asking for? The same goes for pain, chronic joint pain, muscle aches, migraines. These are not just random bad luck. They are signs of inflammation, often driven by food sensitivities, poor gut health, or hidden infections. If all you do is take a painkiller, you're muffling the signal, but you're not addressing what caused the inflammation in the first place. If you identify and remove the trigger, whether it's gluten, dairy, processed foods, or something else entirely, you often see the pain melt away. I've had patients who thought they needed knee replacement surgery, who couldn't walk without pain, and within a few weeks of changing their diet, they were walking pain-free. That's the power of listening to the body's signals. Even things like skin issues, eczema, acne, psoriasis, they're not skin problems. They're internal imbalances that are showing up on the surface. Your skin is like a mirror of your gut and your immune system. When the gut is inflamed, when the liver is overloaded, when toxins are not being cleared, the skin becomes the exit route. Creams and steroids may calm it temporarily, but the true fix comes from healing the inside, repairing the gut, reducing inflammation, supporting detoxification. Then the skin clears on its own. And what about mood, anxiety, depression, session, brain fog, memory problems? These are some of the most common complaints people have, and yet we often treat them as if they're purely in the head. But the brain is connected to everything else in the body. Inflammation, nutrient deficiencies, hormone imbalances, poor gut health, all of these can affect the way your brain functions. If you have brain fog after meals, that's not a random coincidence. That's your body telling you something about how it's processing food. If your mood crashes in the afternoon, that's a signal about blood sugar. If your anxiety spikes when you're underslept, that's your nervous system asking for rest and balance. These signals are not problems to be silenced. They're opportunities to understand the root cause. The way I often explain it to patients is this. Your body is like a complex orchestra. Every instrument represents a different system. Your gut, your hormones, your immune system, your brain, your metabolism. When all the instruments are in tune, the music is beautiful, and that's health. But when one instrument goes out of tune, you notice the disharmony. If more instruments get out of tune, the whole orchestra starts to sound chaotic. Symptoms are that noise. The conventional approach is like putting in earplugs so you don't hear the disharmony anymore. Functional medicine is like going to each musician and helping them tune their instrument so the orchestra can play in harmony again. That's the difference. And once you start thinking this way, you can't unsee it. Suddenly you realize that most of what we call disease is really the result of the body's systems falling out of balance. You also realize that the body is incredibly forgiving. You can abuse it for years with poor food, no sleep, stress, toxins, and yet when you finally give it what it needs, nutrients, rest, movement, connection, it starts to heal, often faster than you'd imagine. I've seen patients reverse decades of disease in a matter of months by addressing root causes. It's not always easy, but it's absolute Eli possible. This is why I get so excited about this approach, because it shifts the power back to you. It's not about waiting for the next wonder drug or living at the mercy of your genes. It's about recognizing that every single day, with every choice you make, you are influencing your health. You are either feeding disease or feeding health. Every meal, every night of sleep, every walk you take, every moment you choose to breathe deeply instead of stressing, it all adds up. These are not small things. They're the foundation of healing. So when we see symptoms, instead of asking what drug will make this go away, let's ask, what is my body trying to tell me? What is the real story behind this pain, this fatigue, this fog, this imbalance? Because once you understand the language of the body, you realize it's not working against you, it's working for you, it's guiding you back to balance. And that's the essence of treating chronic illness, not fighting the body, but partnering with it, listening to it, and creating the conditions for it to do what it already knows how to do. Heal,